The coast of Maine was battered by strong winds. 70-year-old Martha Bloom stood at the top of the lighthouse, peering through her telescope at the horizon. Her hands were rough from decades of facing the sea, but her movements were steady and precise. This lighthouse was both her home and her workplace, and after losing her husband, Henry, it had become her only refuge. Every day followed the same rhythm. In the morning, she polished the lens. At noon, she tended her small garden. At night, she listened to the Coast Guard's daily reports through her radio. It was a lonely but peaceful life. The sea did not change. Neither did she. That afternoon, the sound of a car broke the stillness. A shiny Tesla rolled up the gravel path. Eric, her grandson, stepped out. Beside him stood a young blonde woman. "Grandma." Eric's voice was bright as he ran toward her and wrapped her in a hug. "I missed you, Eric." Martha's face lit up with a mix of surprise and joy. "I didn't expect you." Eric introduced the woman. "This is my fiancée, Chloe." Chloe offered a flawless smile as she shook Martha's hand. "It's an honor to meet you, Mrs. Bloom. Eric has told me so much about you." Martha noticed Chloe's hand was cold, but she returned the smile. Inside, they sat on the worn sofa. Eric opened a bottle of wine. "Grandma, we have a proposal. We're going on a Bermuda cruise next week. We want you to come with us." Martha hesitated. A trip. She had rarely left the lighthouse. Eric spoke gently. "You've spent your whole life here. It's time to rest. We'll take care of everything." Chloe chimed in. "It'll be a wonderful trip. A luxury cruise. Perfect for you." Martha studied their faces. Eric's eyes seemed sincere. Chloe's smile was perfect, but a subtle unease stirred inside her. "I'll think about it." Eric beamed. "Thank you, Grandma. It's going to be unforgettable." He exchanged a glance with Chloe. Her smile sharpened. After sunset, they drove away. Alone again, Martha stared at the darkening sea. She opened the travel pamphlet they left behind. Gleaming decks, turquoise waters, but an inexplicable worry grew in her chest. She lit the lighthouse. The massive lens turned, casting beams across the water. The sea was beautiful, but dangerous. She knew that better than anyone. Her phone rang. It was Eric. "Have you decided? I really want you to come." Martha paused, then replied, "I'll go." Eric's voice brightened. "Thank you. We'll pick you up Monday." After the call, Martha gazed out the window. The waves crashed in the dark. A chill ran through her. Something was wrong, but she pushed the feeling aside. He's family. The light from the lighthouse swept across the Black Sea, turning steadily in the night. 3 nights before the cruise, Martha was checking the communications equipment at the top of the lighthouse. The radio crackled with routine Coast Guard chatter. Outside, the wind grew harsher, and the crashing waves echoed through the tower. Then she heard a faint voice from below. She froze. It was Eric. He was staying in the guest room, but who was he talking to at this hour? Quietly, she descended the stairs. At the corner of the hallway, she stopped. Eric stood by the window, holding a satellite phone. His voice was low and tense. "Once I get the insurance money, I'll move to New York and start a new life. Black tide begins now." Martha's heartbeat quickened. Chloe's voice joined in. "It has to be perfect. No mistakes. Make it look like an accident on the cruise." 72 hours. Eric replied. "Don't worry. The organization has everything set. The old woman will be easy." Martha pressed her back against the wall, hands trembling. The old woman. They meant her. Insurance money. Accident. Black tide. The puzzle locked into place. She quietly retreated upstairs to her room, locked the door, and sat on the bed. Her hands were still shaking. Eric, her grandson, plotting to kill her. Unbelievable, but the conversation had been crystal clear. The next morning, She drove along the coast to a small boat repair shop. Walter Graham was there, an old friend and former Coast Guard captain who now worked as a maritime safety consultant. "Walter." Martha's voice made him look up. "Martha, what brings you here so early?" His expression hardened. "What's going on?" She glanced around and lowered her voice. "We need to talk. It's serious." They went into a small office behind the workshop. She told him everything she'd overheard. Walter's face tightened. "Black-tied. You heard that? You know it?" she asked. Walter nodded. "It's a cruise insurance fraud ring. The FBI's been chasing them for years. They target elderly passengers, stage accidents in international waters, and cash out the insurance. But it's hard to prove. No witnesses." Martha's stomach dropped. "Then we go to the police." Walter shook his head. "No evidence. All you have is an overheard conversation. They'll change their plans if they sense we're onto them." "Then what?" she asked. Walter thought for a moment. "You have to go. Get on the cruise. Gather evidence from the inside. I'll give you a tracker. It'll record and transmit everything." "Isn't that dangerous?" she asked. Walter didn't lie. "It is. But I'll coordinate with the Coast Guard. One signal and we'll move in." "You're not alone, Martha." She looked out at the sea. Waves crashed against the shore. She had lived with the ocean all her life. She had lost her husband to it, but she had never feared it. "It's my turn to light the way," she whispered. Walter opened a drawer and handed her a small box. Inside was a bracelet-like device. "Wear it. GPS and audio transmission. Panic button too." Martha fastened it to her wrist. Lighter than she expected. "Ready?" Walter asked. Martha nodded. "Ready." Her eyes were steady. A lighthouse keeper must always find light in the dark. On Monday morning, Eric and Chloe arrived at the lighthouse to pick Martha up. She stood at the door with a small travel bag in her hand. "Ready, Grandma?" Eric asked with a bright smile. Martha answered with a gentle grin. "Of course. I'm excited." On the way to the harbor, Chloe kept talking cheerfully. "Grandma, we even booked a spa on the cruise. It's going to be amazing." Martha gazed out the window. "Thank you." Around her wrist was the bracelet Walter had given her. When they reached the harbor, a massive cruise ship appeared before them. A 12-deck luxury liner called Ocean Pearl. Passengers lined up to board. Eric picked up her bag. "Our cabin is on the 7th floor. Ocean view." As they walked down the hallway toward their room, Martha observed everything. The crew's movements, the location of the emergency exits, the blind spots of the security cameras. Her years at the lighthouse had taught her one thing: always know the escape routes. The cabin was spacious and elegant, with a balcony overlooking the ocean. "Do you like it, Grandma?" Chloe asked. Martha nodded. "It's beautiful, thank you." Eric said their room was next door. "Knock anytime if you need anything." Martha smiled, but to her it sounded like a warning. A reminder that they would be watching. When she was alone, Martha stepped onto the balcony. The ship was slowly leaving the harbor. She touched the bracelet. "Walter will hear this," she whispered softly. "I'm on board. It starts now." That evening, they dined in the ship's main dining room. Under glittering chandeliers, hundreds of passengers enjoyed their meals. Eric chose a table tucked in a quiet corner. "It's better here, Grandma." During dinner, Martha noticed a man at the next table. He looked to be in his 40s, wearing a crew uniform, but his movements were stiff, unnatural. He wasn't a real sailor. He exchanged a quick look with Eric. After the meal, Martha excused herself for a walk. On the deck, the wind was cool and the night was settling in. A few passengers leaned against the railing, watching the darkening sea. Martha moved slowly, scanning her surroundings. Then she saw the same man at the edge of the deck, speaking into a radio in a low voice. 7th floor, cabin 742. 3 days. Her heart raced. That was her cabin number. She hurried back to her room, locked the door, and whispered into the bracelet. Walter, can you hear me? Suspicious crew member. Cabin number exposed. She examined the room carefully. Something felt different. Opening the closet, she saw her pill bottle slightly moved. She picked it up and opened the lid. Her blood pressure pills were inside, but the color looked slightly off. She wrapped them in tissue and hid them deep inside a drawer. A knock came. "Grandma, it's me." Chloe's voice. Martha took a deep breath and opened the door. Chloe stood there holding a tray. "Warm milk for you. Sleep well." Martha thanked her and accepted it. Chloe glanced into the room, smiled, and left. "See you at the pool in the morning." Martha stared at the milk. A thin layer of powder floated on the surface. She poured it down the toilet. Lying on the bed, she listened to the ship cutting through the waves. Outside, the night was pitch black. They had entered international waters. She gripped the bracelet tightly. Switched pills. Drugged milk. They've started to move. Martha closed her eyes, but sleep didn't come. The long night had begun. It was the afternoon of the third day. The ship was sailing near the waters of the Bermuda Triangle. Martha sat on a lounge chair by the pool, pretending to read a book while carefully watching the people around her. Eric approached with a casual smile. "Grandma, how about watching the stars on deck tonight? The weather is supposed to be perfect." Martha lifted her eyes from the book. "That sounds nice." His smile was warm, but his eyes felt cold. 11 o'clock. "The moonlight will be beautiful." Back in her cabin, Martha whispered into the bracelet. 11 tonight. Deck. Something will happen." A short vibration signaled Walter's response. She took a small can of pepper spray from the drawer and slipped it into her pocket. At dinner, the atmosphere felt different. Eric and Chloe were unusually kind. "Grandma, have a glass of wine." Chloe poured it gracefully. Martha accepted the glass but never drank. On her way to the restroom, she discreetly emptied it into a potted plant. When she returned to her cabin later, something felt wrong. A faint sweet scent lingered in the air. She examined the room carefully. The pillowcases had been changed. She lifted one and smelled it. A chemical odor, like chloroform, filled her nose. She threw the pillow out of the window and pulled a spare cushion from the closet to use instead. They wanted her to sleep. Deeply, defenseless. By 10 o'clock, Martha joined the deck party. Live music played, and passengers danced under the night sky. Eric and Chloe waved at her from the bar. "Grandma, there you are." Chloe handed her a cocktail. "Try this. It's delicious." Martha touched the rim of the glass to her lips but did not drink. When Eric turned to talk to another guest, she tipped the cocktail over the railing. The sea swallowed it. As the music faded, the crowd began to disperse. 11 o'clock approached. Eric took her arm gently. "Grandma, this way. There's a perfect spot." He led her toward the far end of the deck. The area was deserted. Only the railing separated them from the dark, deep water below. The moonlight shimmered on the waves. Chloe appeared behind her. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Martha stood between the two of them. "Tired, Grandma?" Eric's voice was soft. "Maybe you should rest." His hand gripped her shoulder. Martha deliberately swayed. "Yes, I feel dizzy." She leaned heavily on the railing, feigning drunkenness. Then the suspicious man she had seen before emerged from the shadows. He wore a crew uniform, but gloves covered his hands. He exchanged a glance with Eric. A signal. The man approached. "Are you all right, ma'am?" His voice was polite, but his eyes were ice. Martha staggered more. "I drank too much." She leaned against the railing. He grabbed her other arm. Now 2 men held her on each side. Chloe stood behind, her smile cold. "It's almost over." Her words were quiet but sharp. They began pulling her toward the railing. Her feet lifted slightly from the deck. Below was nothing but black water. Eric's voice was low. "Sorry, Grandma. We need the money." Martha pressed hard on the bracelet. The emergency signal. In the same instant, she dropped the act and pulled out the spray. The man screamed as the mist hit his face. A roar echoed from above. Helicopters. A blinding searchlight cut through the night, flooding the deck with white light. "The Coast Guard." A voice boomed through a loudspeaker. "This is the United States Coast Guard. All passengers and crew, stay where you are." Eric's face turned pale. "What the hell?" Chloe tried to run, but armed officers appeared at the entrance to the deck. "Nobody move." Martha gripped the railing firmly, her gaze steady. "It's over, Eric. Your game ends here." Helicopters circled above the cruise ship, their intense lights flooding the deck. In an instant, the place turned chaotic. Passengers poured out of their cabins, gathering to see what was happening. 6 Coast Guard officers descended on ropes, landing on the deck with trained precision. "Hands up, on your knees," the commander shouted. Eric, Chloe, and the disguised crewman had no choice but to obey. Walter climbed down from the helicopter and ran toward Martha. "Are you all right?" Martha nodded and pushed herself up from the railing. "I'm fine." They were about to make their move. Walter exhaled deeply. The officers cuffed Eric and Chloe. Eric tried to resist. "What is this? We didn't do anything." The commander's voice was cold. "Eric Bloom, Chloe West, and James Carter. You are under arrest for attempted murder and organized fraud." James Carter, the disguised crewman, stayed silent, but Chloe shouted desperately. "You've got it wrong. We were just traveling with her." Martha stepped forward calmly. "Everything is recorded. Your voice, Eric's words, all the evidence." Chloe's face drained of color. Eric looked at Martha. "Grandma, how?" Martha raised her wrist, showing the bracelet. "A lighthouse keeper is always prepared. You never understood that." As the officers began to take the 3 away, the captain appeared, visibly alarmed. "What's going on here?" Walter stepped toward him. "Captain, an insurance fraud ring has infiltrated this ship. We need your cooperation." The captain nodded in shock. "Of course. Whatever you need." Walter turned to the officers. "Check the crew list. Start a full search of the vessel. There may be more accomplices." Martha looked at Eric one last time. His head hung low. "Grandma, I'm so sorry." His voice trembled. Martha's reply was cold. "Sorry doesn't matter. You made a choice. Now you face the consequences." The officers led the 3 toward the interior, preparing to transfer them to the helicopter. Passengers whispered to each other, watching the scene unfold. A woman approached Martha. "You stopped them. You're so brave." Martha smiled softly. "Not brave. I just wanted to live." Walter placed a hand on her shoulder. "Without you, we never would have caught this ring. You saved countless lives, Martha." The captain made an announcement over the intercom. "We apologize to all passengers. The situation is under control, and everyone is safe. The cruise will continue its normal route." A wave of relief spread among the crowd. Walter turned to Martha. "You want to return with us on the helicopter?" Martha shook her head. "No, I want to finish the trip. I need a real break now." Walter smiled. "Good, you deserve it. I'll leave 2 officers on board for your safety." The helicopter lifted off, carrying Eric, Chloe, and James. Powerful winds swept across the deck. The lights grew smaller and disappeared into the night sky. Martha leaned against the railing, watching them fade. Before leaving, Walter spoke to her. "The FBI will follow up. They'll need your testimony." Martha nodded firmly. "Whenever they need me. This time, I'll see it through." Walter gripped her hand tightly. "I'm proud of you, my friend." The deck grew quiet again. Passengers returned to their cabins, and the crew resumed their duties. Martha stood alone by the railing, gazing at the sea. Moonlight danced on the surface of the waves. The bracelet on her wrist vibrated softly. Walter's final message: "Rest well. You did it." Martha smiled and gently touched the bracelet. Then she walked slowly back to her cabin. The long night was coming to an end. A week later, Martha sat inside the FBI field office in Portland, Maine. The meeting room was cold and flooded with fluorescent light. 2 FBI agents sat across the table. "Mrs. Bloom, thank you for your cooperation." The female agent spoke calmly. Martha nodded. The male agent opened a thick file. "We interrogated Eric Bloom, Chloe West, and James Carter. They were members of an organization called Black Tide. Over the past 3 years, they killed at least 12 elderly passengers on cruise ships." Martha's heart sank. 12 lives. The female agent continued. "The method was always the same. They lured seniors onto cruises using family or close acquaintances, staged accidents in international waters, and collected insurance payouts." Martha asked if Eric had planned everything from the start. The male agent nodded. "Eric went bankrupt after a failed investment 2 years ago. Under heavy debt, he met Chloe, a member of Black Tide. She drew him in, so he had targeted her from the beginning." Martha gave a bitter smile. The female agent softened her voice. "You were the insured, and Eric was the sole beneficiary. You were the perfect target. But you turned everything around." The male agent turned his laptop toward her. On the screen was a sprawling organizational chart. Black Tide was far larger than she had imagined, involving crew members, insurance employees, even lawyers. "Thanks to the recordings and location data you sent, we traced the entire network. 23 arrests have been made, and the investigation continues. You are a hero, Mrs. Bloom." Martha shook her head. "I just wanted to survive." The male agent smiled. "That is courage." He slid another file across the table. "Eric and Chloe's statements. Would you like to read them?" Martha hesitated, then nodded. She read slowly. Eric's statement was full of excuses: debt, pressure, lack of choice. But the final line caught her eye. He asked for her forgiveness and said he would regret it for the rest of his life. Her eyes burned, but no tears fell. The female agent told her the trial was scheduled for next month. They would need her as a witness. Martha nodded firmly. Of course, she would see it through. As she stepped outside, sunlight greeted her. Walter stood by the car, waiting. "How was it?" Martha took a deep breath. "It's over. Finally over." In the car, Walter asked if she wanted to go home. She gazed out the window at the ocean. "Can we stop by the shore?" Walter smiled and turned the wheel. They sat on a bench by the coast, watching the waves crash. "Do you regret it?" Martha asked. "Regret what?" "Sending me on that cruise." Walter shook his head. "No, you were the only one who could do it. And you did." Martha gave a quiet laugh. "You know, on that ship I was terrified. But I also felt alive. Isn't that strange?" Walter patted her shoulder. "Not strange at all. You fought, and you won." For a while, they sat in silence, listening to the waves and watching gulls circle above. Martha touched the bracelet on her wrist. It was time to take it off. 1 month later, the federal courthouse in Maine was packed with spectators. Reporters filled the front rows, cameras flashing like lightning. Martha sat behind the witness stand, her hands folded in her lap. When the judge entered, everyone rose. The voice of the court echoed through the chamber. Eric Bloom, Chloe West, and James Carter sat in the defendant's box with handcuffs on their wrists. The prosecutor read the charges: organized attempted murder, insurance fraud, and complicity in 12 counts of first-degree murder. The courtroom held its breath. The jurors' faces were grave. The first witness, an FBI agent, described the full extent of the black tide network. 12 victims over 3 years, $14 million in fraudulent claims. Murmurs spread through the room. The second witness, the cruise ship captain, testified that James Carter had entered the crew with forged documents, and that he had observed suspicious behavior more than once. Finally, it was Martha's turn. Her name was called. She rose slowly and walked to the stand. Eric's gaze followed her, but she refused to meet his eyes. After the oath, she sat down. The prosecutor asked her to recount the events of that night. Martha took a deep breath and began. She told the court everything, from her grandson's invitation to the cruise, to overhearing the satellite call, to working with Walter, to surviving the danger on board. The courtroom listened in silence. They tried to push me over the railing. My grandson held my arm and said that they needed the money. The room erupted in shock. The defense lawyer began cross-examination, suggesting that she might be lying out of resentment. Martha denied it calmly. She did not hate her grandson, she said. She was simply telling the truth. The prosecutor played the recordings. Eric and Chloe's voices filled the courtroom, boasting about insurance money and a new life in New York. The jurors' expressions hardened. Her testimony ended. As she stepped down, she looked at Eric for the first time. His eyes were wet. He whispered something faint, but she kept walking. In the final statements, Chloe insisted on her innocence, while Eric stood and spoke with a trembling voice. He offered no excuses, only an apology to his grandmother. The jury retired to deliberate. 2 hours later, they returned. The foreman stood, guilty on all counts for Eric Bloom, Chloe West, and James Carter. Chloe screamed in disbelief as guards restrained her. The judge struck the gavel. Eric bowed his head. Sentencing followed. 25 years for Eric Bloom. Life imprisonment for Chloe West and James Carter. The room buzzed as reporters scribbled furiously. Outside the courthouse, Martha faced the swarm of journalists. A microphone hovered near her face. She paused before answering. Justice has been served, but I am not happy. Only relieved that it is over. Walter guided her through the crowd to the car. As they drove away, she glanced back at the courthouse standing under the bright sunlight. It was truly over. That night, a fierce storm struck the coast of Maine. The wind howled, waves crashed against the rocks, and white spray leapt into the air. Thunder rolled through the sky like distant cannon fire. Martha stood at the top of the lighthouse, checking the great lens with a steady, familiar hand. When she flipped the switch, the beacon flared to life. A powerful beam sliced through the darkness and began its slow, rhythmic rotation. Through the windows, she watched the furious sea. The black water churned and heaved as if alive with rage. But Martha's face was calm. She had seen this sight all her life. It no longer frightened her. The radio crackled with Walter's voice. "Martha, can you hear me?" She picked it up. "I hear you, Walter. The storm is something else tonight." Walter laughed. "That is why we need the lighthouse. Are you all right?" Martha looked out at the storm. The light cut through the chaos. "I am all right, truly all right." Her voice was serene. Walter hesitated, then spoke again. "Your story was on the national news today." She shook her head. "I did not watch. It does not matter." Walter told her that people were calling her a hero. The title read "The Courage of the Lighthouse Grandmother." Martha smiled softly. "I only wanted to live." Silence filled the line for a moment. Walter asked if she was really okay now. Martha gazed at the beacon. "The sea never changes, Walter. It remains beautiful and dangerous. But I have changed." He asked how. She touched her wrist. The bracelet was gone, tucked away in a drawer. "I am not afraid anymore. Not of the sea, not of loneliness, not of betrayal. I am stronger than I ever believed." Walter's voice grew warm. I always knew that. She smiled. Thank you, my friend. Rest now. I will visit in the morning after the storm. Be safe. She set down the radio and stepped onto the balcony. The wind whipped her gray hair around her face. Below, the waves pounded the rocks with relentless fury, but the lighthouse stood firm. Martha thought back over the past weeks. The cruise, the betrayal, the fear, and her survival. It all felt like someone else's story, yet it was hers. She had lived it. Eric's face appeared in her mind. His tears in the courtroom. His shaking voice. A quiet ache filled her chest, but peace settled over it like a warm blanket. She had done what was right. Justice had been carried out. Thunder cracked again. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the horizon. Martha looked out beyond the line of the storm. Somewhere out there, a new morning waited. The beacon kept turning, steady and unwavering, cutting through the darkness. She ran her hand over the lens. This light would guide someone tonight. It would bring hope to ships caught in the storm. She descended the stairs and returned to the living room. She lit a fire in the hearth. Warm light filled the room. She sat on the sofa and watched the storm through the window. The tempest raged on, but Martha felt calm. She was alone, but not lonely. She was strong, alive, and at peace. The lighthouse was her home. The sea was her companion. And she trusted herself now. Slowly, the storm began to fade. The wind softened, thunder grew distant. Martha closed her eyes. By morning, the sky would be clear again. She would tend the lighthouse as she always had. The light stretched across the dark sea, unwavering even in the heart of the storm. Like Martha Bloom, the 70-year-old lighthouse keeper had weathered the most dangerous tide of her life, and her light still shone. Night deepened. The storm passed. Only the beam of the lighthouse remained, quietly illuminating the vast sea. And beneath that light, Martha drifted peacefully to sleep.